The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. Its hull gleamed like polished metal, stretching for kilometers in every direction. Inside the ship, Admiral Kiwu stood before a holographic display, showing the blue planet below. His 6 arms moved across control panels while his large dark eyes studied the data streaming across the screens. "Such a small world," he said to his aide, Commander Veltar. "Hard to believe these humans have caused so much trouble." Kiwu belonged to the Hegemony, a group of 12 different alien species that controlled most of the galaxy. For thousands of years they had brought order to the stars. When new species reached space, the Hegemony would offer them a simple choice: join them or be destroyed. Most chose to join. But humans were different. They had been exploring space for only 200 years, yet they refused to listen. They built colonies on worlds the Hegemony claimed. They mined asteroids in systems that belonged to other species. Worst of all, they acted like they had every right to be there. "Admiral," Veltar said, his voice crackling through the translator device. "The human ship is approaching." Through the view screen, Kiwu watched a smaller vessel dock with his flagship. The human ship looked crude compared to Hegemony technology. Its hull was covered in welded patches and repair marks. Steam vented from dozens of small ports. It looked more like a flying junkyard than a military vessel. Minutes later, the human delegation entered Kiwu's command chamber. The artificial gravity adjusted to accommodate their smaller bodies. The air mixture changed to help them breathe. Kiwu had ordered these courtesies, not out of kindness, but to show how advanced Hegemony technology was. The human leader stepped forward. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and calm eyes. His uniform was simple and clean but not impressive. Behind him stood 2 other humans, a woman with sharp features and a younger man who kept looking around the chamber with obvious curiosity. "I am Admiral Lee Dongmin of Earth's United Defense Command," the human said. His voice was steady and polite. "This is Captain Park Soo-jin and Commander Kim Hae-won." Kiwu activated his translation device and spoke. "I am Admiral Kiwu of the Hegemony Enforcement Fleet. You may consider this a great honor. Few species receive personal visits from Hegemony leadership." Dongmin nodded slightly. "We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us." Kiwu studied the human's face. Most species showed fear or awe when meeting Hegemony representatives. These humans seemed interested, like they were studying him as much as he was studying them. "Let me be clear about why I am here," Kiwu continued. "Your species has expanded beyond acceptable limits. You have built settlements and systems that belong to established Hegemony members. You have mined resources without permission. You have ignored our warnings." Captain Soo-jin stepped forward slightly. "With respect, Admiral, we were not aware that any particular species owned those systems. Our surveys showed them to be uninhabited." "Ownership is not determined by habitation alone," Kiwu replied. "The Hegemony has maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. We determine which species may settle where. Your expansion threatens that order." Commander Hae-won spoke for the first time. "What exactly are you asking us to do?" Kiwu's 4 eyes focused on each human in turn. "I am not asking, I am telling. Humanity will withdraw from all disputed territories immediately. You will submit to Hegemony oversight for all future expansion. Your military will be reduced to system defense only. Your technology will be shared with Hegemony scientists." The chamber fell silent. Kiwu could hear the hum of his ship's engines and the quiet whisper of air circulation systems. The humans looked at each other, but their expressions remained calm. "And if we refuse?" Admiral Dongmin asked. Kiwu gestured to the holographic display behind him. It showed star charts marking Hegemony territories. Hundreds of systems glowed, with the colors of different member species. At the edge of the display, a few dozen systems glowed red, human colonies. "You see how small your presence is compared to ours," Kiwu said. "The combined fleets of 12 species versus your few dozen worlds. The choice should be obvious." Dongmin walked closer to the display, studying it carefully. Soo-jin and Hae-won joined him. They spoke quietly among themselves in their own language for several minutes. Finally, Dongmin turned back to Kiwu. "Admiral, your offer is generous, but humanity must respectfully decline." Kaiwu felt his chest sacs inflate with surprise. No species had ever refused hegemony ultimatums so calmly. Usually there was panic, desperate bargaining, or immediate surrender. "You understand what this means?" Kaiwu asked. "We do," Dongmin replied. "But humans have a saying. Some things are worth fighting for. Our freedom is one of them." Kiwu's translator struggled with the human concept. Fighting for abstract ideals made no logical sense. Species fought for resources, territory, or survival, not for concepts that could not be touched or measured. "Your decision is final?" Kiwu asked. "It is." Kiwu nodded slowly. "Then you have chosen your fate. You have 72 hours to reconsider. After that, the hegemony will act." The humans left as quietly as they had arrived. Kiwu watched their crude ship detach from his flagship and disappear into hyperspace. He turned to Commander Veltar with confidence. "Begin preparations. This will be over quickly." The attack on New Busan colony came exactly 72 hours later. Admiral Kiwu watched from his command ship as hegemony plasma cannons turned the human settlement's outer defenses into molten metal. The colony's small defense fleet scattered like frightened fish, their ships disappearing into the darkness between planets. "Pitiful," said Commander Veltar, studying the tactical display. "Their ships run instead of fighting. This will be easier than we thought." Kiwu nodded as he watched the human vessels flee. Most species tried to fight back during the first battle, even when they knew they would lose. It was a matter of pride. But these humans simply vanished into space, leaving their colony defenseless. The hegemony forces landed on New Busan without resistance. The colonists had already evacuated to underground shelters. Within 6 hours, the planet was under alien control. Kiwu felt satisfied. Perhaps the humans would surrender now that they saw how hopeless their situation was. But reports from other systems confused him. Human colonies throughout the outer rim were being abandoned. Ships were fleeing toward the inner worlds. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. It was as if the entire human military had simply disappeared. "Admiral," came a voice over the communication system. It was Commander Thelix leading the attack on the Mokpo mining station. "We have secured the facility, but something is wrong." "Explain," Kiwu ordered. The miners left behind all their equipment, but they removed all the control systems. Every computer, every data core, every piece of software. The station is useless to us now. Similar reports came from across human space. Colonies surrendered easily, but their industrial equipment had been stripped clean. Weapons factories stood empty. Shipyards contained only half-built hulls with no engines or control systems. 3 days after the first attack, Captain So Young struck back. Her ship, the Inchen's Pride, emerged from behind a large asteroid in the Gwangju system. To hegemony sensors, it looked like an ordinary cargo vessel. Its hull was battered and patched. Steam leaked from various ports. It appeared to be limping toward the nearest space station. Commander Naltok, leading a supply convoy to the newly captured system, decided to investigate. His 3 escort ships moved to intercept the human vessel. "Human cargo ship," he broadcast. "You will submit to inspection. Please don't hurt us," came the reply from Captain So Young. Her voice sounded frightened and weak. "We're just trying to evacuate civilians." Naltok smiled. This was exactly what he expected from humans: cowardice and surrender. His ships moved closer to the cargo vessel. That was when So Young sprang her trap. Hidden panels along the cargo ship's hull suddenly opened. Missile launchers emerged from fake cargo containers. What had looked like repair patches were actually armor plates. The steam that seemed to indicate engine problems was actually a cooling system for weapons that no cargo ship should have carried. "All units fire," So Young shouted to her crew. Lieutenant Jae Hyun, operating the weapons console, launched every missile they had. The surprised hegemony ships tried to respond, but they were too close and too unprepared. 2 escort vessels exploded immediately. The third managed to launch a distress signal before So Young's guns tore it apart. Within minutes, the human ship had destroyed the entire convoy and vanished back into the asteroid field. Similar attacks began happening throughout hegemony-controlled space. Ships that looked like merchant vessels turned out to be disguised warships. Mining platforms that seemed abandoned suddenly activated hidden weapon systems when hegemony forces came near. Even small civilian transports carried enough firepower to damage military vessels. Commander Veltar brought the reports to Kiwu's attention. "Admiral, we have lost 7 supply convoys this week. The humans are using some kind of new tactics." Kiwu studied the tactical reports. The attacks followed no pattern he recognized. Traditional military doctrine called for concentration of force, decisive battles, and clear objectives. But the humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "They fight like pirates," Veltar continued. "Hit and run attacks. No honor in battle." But Kiwu was beginning to suspect something more disturbing. Pirates fought for profit. These attacks served no economic purpose. The humans were not stealing cargo or capturing ships. They were simply destroying anything they could reach, then disappearing. The worst discovery came from Captain Mordak, investigating a human trading post in the Jeonju system. The facility appeared to be a simple commercial station where merchants bought and sold goods. But when hegemony forces boarded it, they found weapon storage bays hidden behind false walls. The station's central computer contained detailed intelligence reports on hegemony's ship movements and tactics. "It's not just a trading post," Mordak reported. "It's a military intelligence center disguised as a civilian facility." Kiwu felt a cold sensation in his chest sacs. If the humans had been disguising military installations as civilian ones, how many other harmless facilities were actually weapons platforms? How many merchant ships were actually warships in disguise? He ordered a review of all intelligence about human space. What they found disturbed him greatly. Nearly every human facility served multiple purposes. Factories that made consumer goods could quickly switch to weapons production. Civilian shipyards could build military vessels. Even schools and hospitals contained emergency weapon storage. "Their entire civilization is militarized," Veltar observed. "Every human is potentially a soldier." Kiwu stared at the tactical display showing human space. Red dots marked the locations of recent attacks. There were dozens of them, scattered across hundreds of light years. The humans had not concentrated their forces for a single decisive battle. Instead, they had turned their entire territory into a weapon. For the first time since the war began, Admiral Kiwu felt uncertain about the outcome. 6 months into the war, Colonel Nam Junseo stood in the ruins of Daegu Station, watching alien ships approach through the shattered viewport. His men had been fighting for 3 days without sleep. Half of them were wounded, all of them were ready to die. "Sir," said Sergeant Kim Tae-ho, checking his weapon for the last time. "They're breaking through Sector 7. Junseo nodded calmly. The hegemony forces had finally overwhelmed their defenses. In a few minutes, alien soldiers would flood into the command center. Most species would surrender at this point. Their leaders would negotiate for the lives of their troops. But humans were not most species. "Begin final protocol," Junseo ordered. His men smiled grimly. They had been preparing for this moment since the siege began. Every corridor leading to the command center was now filled with explosives. The station's reactor had been rigged to overload. When the aliens finally reached them, they would find only death. "It has been an honor serving with you all," Junseo said quietly. His soldiers began singing an old military song as the alien footsteps grew closer. The hegemony, troops outside the door heard the human voices and hesitated. In their experience, defeated enemies begged for mercy. They did not sing. When the aliens finally broke down the door, they found the command center empty, except for a recording device playing a message in broken alien language. "Welcome to hell." The station's reactor exploded 30 seconds later, taking 3 hegemony cruisers with it. Similar scenes played out across human space. On Incheon Colony, Major Kim Ye-jin led the defense of a civilian shelter. When alien forces surrounded the building, she activated hidden charges that brought down the entire structure. burying attackers and defenders together. Her last transmission was heard by human forces throughout the system. "Tell Earth we held the line." The aliens had never encountered enemies who fought this way. Commander Veltar brought increasingly disturbing reports to Admiral Kiwu's attention. "Their soldiers refuse medical treatment when captured," Veltar said, his voice shaking. "They would rather die than accept our help. What kind of species chooses death over life?" But the human way of war extended far beyond individual heroics. Back on Earth, Director Choi Min-jung coordinated a transformation that amazed even human observers. Every factory, every shipyard, every manufacturing facility had switched to military production. Workers labored 18-hour shifts without complaint. Retired engineers came back to design new weapons. Children in schools learned to assemble ammunition instead of studying literature. Entire cities became weapons factories. "Production reports, Director," said her aide, Lieutenant Park Min-ho, handing her a datapad. Min-jung studied the numbers with satisfaction. Earth was now producing more warships in a month than most hegemony worlds built in a year. But it was not just quantity that impressed her. Human engineers were improving the designs with each new ship. Captain Yoon Sung-ho commanded one of these new vessels, the Soul's Vengeance. His ship incorporated technology captured from hegemony forces, but modified in ways that confused alien engineers. Human weapons fired faster and hit harder. Human shields lasted longer under enemy fire. Human engines were more efficient and harder to detect. "How do they improve so quickly?" Admiral Kiwu asked his technical staff after reviewing intelligence. Reports. Chief Engineer Zolpak, a six-armed alien with multiple brains, struggled to explain. "Admiral, their approach to technology is chaotic. They modify everything. They combine systems that should not work together. They ignore safety protocols. By all logic, their ships should explode. Instead, they perform better than ours." The most disturbing reports came from ground combat. Hegemony forces were accustomed to civilized warfare. When a position became hopeless, defenders surrendered. When casualties became too high, commanders ordered retreat. War had rules that all civilized species followed. Humans ignored every rule. Major General Park Min-ho defended the industrial world of Busan with tactics that horrified alien observers. Instead of meeting the invasion at the landing zones, he let enemy forces advance deep into the cities. Then his troops emerged from sewers, basements, and hidden bunkers to attack from all directions. Alien soldiers found themselves fighting in subway tunnels, where their advanced weapons were useless. Human defenders used primitive explosives and simple firearms, but they knew every street and building. They turned the entire city into a maze of death traps. "They fight like animals," reported one surviving alien commander. "They hide in shadows and strike without warning. They show no mercy to wounded enemies. They celebrate when their own soldiers die fighting." But what truly terrified the hegemony was human adaptability. Every time alien forces developed new tactics, humans found ways to counter them. When hegemony ships began traveling in larger groups, human forces started using bigger weapons. When aliens improved their shields, humans invented new ways to penetrate them. Captain Lee Sora commanded a squadron of experimental ships equipped with artificial intelligence systems. These computer brains learned from every battle, sharing information instantly with other human forces. Within weeks, every human ship in the fleet knew how to exploit weaknesses that had taken months to discover. "It's not possible," Engineer Zolpak told Kiwu. "Learning curves cannot be that steep. Technology cannot advance that quickly." But the evidence was undeniable. Human forces that had been inferior 6 months ago now matched hegemony capabilities. In some areas, they had become superior. Kiwu studied casualty reports with growing alarm. The hegemony was winning battles but losing the war. For every human ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. For every human planet conquered, supply lines to that planet came under constant attack. Most troubling of all, other hegemony species were beginning to question the war. Some complained about the cost. Others worried about the tactics needed to fight humans. A few had even suggested negotiating with Earth. "Admiral," Commander Veltar said quietly, "perhaps it is time to reconsider our approach. Kiwu looked at his aide with 4 angry eyes. We are the hegemony. We do not negotiate with primitives. But deep inside, he was beginning to wonder if humans were primitive at all. The Battle of Titan's Gate was supposed to be Admiral Kiwu's greatest victory. He commanded the largest hegemony fleet ever assembled, over 300 ships from all 12 member species. Their target was the human fortress system protecting the approach to Earth itself. This ends today, Kiwu told his assembled commanders via hologram. Representatives from each alien species nodded their agreement. The Zephyrians with their crystal bodies, the gas-breathing Methani, the insectoid Clixar, all united in their desire to crush human resistance once and for all. But Admiral Li Dongmin had been preparing for this moment for months. Hidden in the shadow of Saturn's rings, his fleet waited with the patience of hunters. Captain Park Soo-jin had spent weeks studying captured hegemony technology, reverse engineering their weapons and shields. Her engineers had worked around the clock to upgrade human ships with alien improvements. Enemy fleet approaching, reported Commander Kim Hae-won from the sensor station. 312 vessels, all major hegemony species represented. Dong-min nodded calmly. Around him, his bridge crew prepared for the battle that would decide humanity's fate. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Sora monitored her drone squadrons, each one controlled by artificial intelligence that had learned from hundreds of previous engagements. Captain Yu Jun-ho checked his experimental kinetic weapons, simple asteroids, accelerated to incredible speeds that could punch through any known armor. Remember, Dongmin said quietly, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every species that will face the hegemony after us. The hegemony fleet entered the Titan system in perfect formation. Kiwu felt confident as he watched his massive force advance. No enemy had ever withstood such overwhelming power. The few dozen human ships scattered throughout the system looked pitiful in comparison. Begin the attack, Kiwu ordered. That was when Major General Park Min-ho activated the first part of his trap. For months, Min-ho had been working to exploit the greatest weakness in the hegemony coalition, the fact that 12 different species did not always agree with each other. Through captured communications equipment, human intelligence agents had been sending false messages between hegemony fleets. Nothing obvious, just small suggestions that certain species were not contributing equally to the war effort. As the battle began, these carefully planted seeds of distrust suddenly bloomed into chaos. The Zephyrian ships suddenly turned their weapons on the Methani vessels, claiming they had detected betrayal signals. The Clixar fleet, already suspicious of their crystal-bodied allies, began firing on Zephyrian cruisers. Within minutes, 3 entire species were fighting each other instead of the humans. What is happening? Kiwu demanded, watching his perfect formation dissolve into madness. But the confusion was only beginning. Captain Soo-jin launched her upgraded human ships from their hiding places in the asteroid belt. These vessels looked familiar to hegemony sensors. They appeared to be captured alien cruisers. But when they opened fire, their weapons proved far more powerful than expected. Human engineers had taken hegemony plasma cannons and improved them with Earth technology. They had combined alien shield systems with human power generators. The result was ships that looked like one thing but fought like something completely different. Lieutenant Colonel Sora released her drone swarms at the same moment. Thousands of small, intelligent robots emerged from concealed launch bays throughout the system. Each drone was connected to a central computer that learned and adapted in real time. When hegemony point defense systems destroyed some drones, the survivors immediately changed their attack patterns. Captain Yu Jun-ho waited until the enemy fleet was fully committed to the battle before unleashing his kinetic weapons. Asteroids, the size of buildings accelerated to near light speed, began smashing through hegemony capital ships. No shield could stop them, no armor could deflect them. They were simple rocks moving so fast they became weapons of mass destruction, but the masterstroke came from Admiral Dongmin himself. Using intelligence gathered over months of warfare, he had identified the communication frequencies used by each hegemony species. At the critical moment of the battle, human transmitters began broadcasting surrender messages on those frequencies. but each message was slightly different. The Zephyrians heard that the Methani had surrendered. The Methani heard that the Clixar were retreating. The Clixar received messages saying the Zephyrians had switched sides. In the chaos of battle, with explosions and jamming filling space, no one could verify what was real. Kiwu watched in horror as his mighty fleet tore itself apart. Ships that should have been fighting humans were destroying each other. Allies who had fought together for centuries suddenly became enemies. His perfectly coordinated attack became a disaster of friendly fire and confusion. All ships, return to formation, he broadcast desperately. But his orders were lost in the storm of false communications and genuine panic. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the hegemony fleet was scattered across the solar system. Nearly half of Kiwu's ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder limped away in disorder, their crews demoralized and confused. Admiral Dongmin stood on his bridge watching the enemy retreat. Around him, his officers celebrated their impossible victory. They had faced the largest fleet in hegemony history, and not just survived. They had won. Casualty report. Dongmin requested minimal losses, reported Commander Heiwan. 12 ships damaged, 3 destroyed. The enemy lost over 100 vessels. Kiwu's flagship was among the survivors, but barely. As his damaged ship fled toward hegemony space, he finally understood what humanity had been trying to tell them from the beginning. This was not a war between primitive humans and advanced aliens. This was a war between a united species and a fractured alliance. The humans had turned the hegemony's greatest strength, their diversity, into their greatest weakness. Admiral Kiwu stared at the tactical display in his command center, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. Red warning lights flashed across 12 different star charts, one for each hegemony homeworld. Human fleets had appeared simultaneously at every single one of them. Impossible, whispered Commander Veltar, his voice shaking. How did they coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy at the same time? On the display, Earth's united defense. Command ships hung in orbit around each hegemony capital world, not attacking, not retreating, just waiting. The message was clear. Humanity could destroy any of them at any moment. Kiwu's own homeworld of Vorkania appeared on the main screen. 30 human ships surrounded the planet where billions of his people lived. Their weapons were powered but not yet firing. It was the most terrifying sight he had ever seen. A communication request came through on all frequencies. Kiwu accepted it with trembling hands. Admiral Lee Dongmin's image appeared on screens throughout hegemony space. Behind him stood his senior officers. Captain Park Soo-jin, Commander Kim Hae-won, Major General Park Min-ho, and dozens of others whose names had become legendary during the war. These humans had beaten the greatest military force in galactic history. Members of the Hegemony Council, Dongmin began, his voice calm and steady. 2 years ago, you offered humanity a choice: submit to your rule or face destruction. Today, we offer you the same choice. Kiwu felt his breathing apparatus struggle to function. Around him, his bridge crew stared at their instruments in shock. Every hegemony military base was reporting the same thing. Human forces in overwhelming numbers, appearing as if from nowhere. How? Kiwu asked, though he was not sure anyone could hear him. As if reading his thoughts, Dongmin continued. You assumed we would fight like every other species you have conquered. You expected us to mass our fleets for great battles. You thought we would compete with you using your rules. Captain Soo-jin stepped forward. Instead, we studied you. Every battle, every tactic, every weakness. We learned how your 12 species communicate. We discovered your supply routes. We found your hidden bases. Commander Hae-won added, most importantly, we realized that your greatest strength was also your greatest weakness. You are 12 different species trying to work together. We are one species with one goal. The truth began to dawn on Kiwu. While the hegemony had been fighting a traditional war, trying to capture human territory piece by piece, humanity had been preparing something completely different. They had not been trying to defend their colonies. They had been preparing to attack every hegemony world simultaneously. Your decision is final? Dongmin asked, giving the Hegemony Council the same ultimatum they had once given Earth. On Zephyr Prime, the crystal beings watched human ships hover above their cities of living light. On Methan, the gas-breathing inhabitants saw human vessels, floating in their toxic atmosphere, somehow adapted to function in conditions that should have been impossible. On Clixar, the insectoid queens realized that the primitive mammals had managed to coordinate an attack more complex than anything, in their hive minds. The Hegemony Council's response came in 37 minutes. We surrender, came the transmission from the council chambers. Kiwu recognized the voice of Supreme Chancellor Morthak, leader of the Hegemony for over 2 centuries. The ancient being's words carried the weight of absolute defeat. Ours. Later, Kiwu found himself aboard the human flagship New Sol, signing documents that would reshape the galaxy. The peace treaty was unlike anything in Hegemony history. Usually conquered species became servants or slaves, but humans demanded something different. We do not want to rule you, Admiral Dongmin explained as they reviewed the terms. We want to end the threat you represent to other species. The treaty was harsh but not cruel. The Hegemony military would be disbanded. Each species would govern only their own worlds. Most importantly, they would never again demand submission from newly, spacefaring civilizations. Your species, Kiwu said quietly to Dongmin. You are not like others we have encountered. Dongmin nodded. We tried to tell you that at the beginning. You would not listen. Kiwu studied the human admiral's face. We have conquered hundreds of species over thousands of years. All of them eventually accepted their fate. Why are humans different? Because, Dongmin replied, we have been fighting wars on our own world for our entire history. We have fought for freedom, for survival, for ideas that have no physical form. We learned long ago that some things are worth any sacrifice. Captain Sujin added, you made one critical error. You assumed that because we had only been in space for 2 centuries, we were inexperienced at war. But humans have been perfecting warfare for thousands of years. We just had not been doing it in space. The final humiliation came when former Hegemony members began requesting human protection. Species that had once looked down on humanity now sought alliance with Earth. They had learned that in a galaxy full of potential threats, it was better to have humans as friends than enemies. Kiwu signed the last document and looked up at Admiral Dongmin. We made a mistake, he admitted. Yes, Dongmin replied simply. You wanted a fight with humanity. Now you understand why that was the worst decision you could have made. As Kiwu prepared to return to his homeworld, he reflected on the lesson learned too late. The Hegemony had ruled through fear and superior technology, but they had never faced a species that simply refused to be ruled. Humans had not won through being stronger or smarter. They had won by being willing to do whatever it took to remain free. The galaxy would never be the same.